Well, welcome everyone. We might as well get started. I'm Bill Kaufman. I'm with Internet2 and InCommon. And thanks for joining. This session is Hosted Solutions, Federation Adapters, and Evaluating Cloud Solutions. And kicking things off is Deidre Chamberlain, who is the CEO of Cirrus Identity. So Deidre, I will hand it over to you.
Welcome everybody. Thank you so much for being here. We have a presentation today that it really started, I think it was like 3 TechX's ago in a room in Orlando where a bunch of people were saying, hey, we need to take a look at identity providers as a service. And that spawned an InCommon work group that Mary's going to speak about briefly as one of the co-chairs. And then a couple of vendor partners, InCommon Catalyst, you'll be hearing more about the Catalyst program later, have developed solutions to help fill the space where it comes to identity providers as a service. And so we wanted to start though, just with a quick poll. And I think Bill's going to be driving those. So Bill, if you could call up the first poll, we want to just get a little sense of what brought you to this session, kind of where you are in your thinking about this. And so I'll go ahead and let Bill call up the first poll. You're on mute, Bill.
Can you see the poll okay?
I don't see it, but you can, okay.
Yeah, we can see it.
Okay, great.
Yeah. It's filling up rapidly. Can you see now that you're not sharing, Deidre?
Yes, I can see it. And the responses are starting to slow. Are you going to close the poll or do you want me to do that?
I can do that.
Okay, cool.
It's like we're still getting 1 or 2 stragglers in. Okay. Can you all see that?
Yep.
Yes.
So a lot of curious folks. That's great. 31% of people undergoing an IAM quote unquote modernization effort. We use that word somewhat tongue in cheek because I know a lot of the commercial vendors use this word modern to say use our product, which is definitely not our goal here. Excellent. Well, thank you very much for sharing that. And then we have one more poll question that we want to ask next. And we'll just, Bill, if you could just fire up the second poll question.
This will be an interesting one.
This is an answer all that apply.
I feel like it's almost a duck race.
Indeed.
And Shibboleth wins. Great information.
Felt bad. I had to check way too many boxes there.
Who was that? We'll have to talk and help you out.
Yeah, no, we're on a good path. It's just getting there.
Excellent.
I suppose one question, I see that 59% said Azure AD. And I wish I would have thought to ask if you would have answered the same a year ago. It seems like definitely I see a big trend towards people migrating to Azure AD. Awesome. Well, thanks. So this is helpful for us as the presenters. I hope it's interesting information for you all who are on the call. I think with that, we'll go ahead and go into our presentation. We wanted to start, we asked Mary if she would be willing to come as one of the co-chairs of the Identity Providers as a Service work group that the InCommon Technical Advisory Committee chartered. If she would come and talk a bit about what were the impetus to form the group and and some of the initial or some of the final results that came out that will be a frame for this presentation. So I'm going to go back to sharing my screen, but I will go ahead and drive the slides, Mary. Oops. 1 second here. Sorry, let me get back where I was before. I was doing a bunch of work on the IAM Her group last night, trying to get some information out to people, and that's where I was. Sorry, those are all messed up. Mary, if you just want to go ahead and start talking about the group, I will get back to where I was.
Sure. Okay. So yeah, thanks, Deidre. I am Mary McKee. I work at Duke University in identity management and IT security. And as Deidre said, I was one of the co-chairs for the InCommon Chartered Identity Providers Service Working Group, along with EJ Monty from Duquesne University, who is the other co-chair of that group. So as we're kind of pulling up slides, for some background, I think it's obvious. We all know that a lot of our community is moving IT infrastructure partially or fully to the cloud. And that's kind of a nod to interest in strategic outsourcing of IAM infrastructure. So if we're trying to keep federation accessible to all of our community, we need to obviously take that into account. So it was in this kind of spirit that the InCommon Technical Advisory Committee chartered this Identity Providers Service Working Group. And I volunteered not so much because Duke was in the market for this kind of thing, but because we had been experiencing some collaboration challenges with institutions moving IAM infrastructure to hosted solutions, and in the process, losing some federation capability. So I initially joined the group thinking that it would really only benefit Duke insofar as it helped InCommon, and we're big users of InCommon, so that benefits us. But actually, this conversation has had a much more immediate benefit to us, which I might have a chance to say about a little bit in a bit. So I think we're looking for, Deidre, the key recommendations on the working group report.
Yes, I am back.
Excellent.
And key recommendations.
Great. So within the working group, we started with a survey to try to get a sense for what people were looking for out of this kind of solution. And after unpacking the results of that survey, the most immediate thing that hit us over the head was that people are thinking of very, very different things when we talk about cloud-based identity providers. The good news was that we were able to kind of coerce all the answers into 4 key architectural models. The first one, which was not the majority by any stretch, but there were some people who were thinking not so much of identity provider as a service, but really identity and access management as a service. We decided that was beyond the scope of our working group, but we always like to mention it because we want to make sure that people know, like, what specifically are you trying to accomplish here? If you're just looking to get a managed identity provider in the federation, this is not what we're talking about. But when we go to the things that were in scope for the working group, some people wanted like a pretty heavy solution that would handle intercampus SSO, federated SSO, and host and manage all institutional and electronic credentials. There was another option that came out where people said, well, we already have a credential store. We don't really want to move it. We're happy with our solution, or we're tied to our solution, but we would like to move just the identity provider piece for campus unfederated SSO and have that tie into our existing credential store. And then there was a really lightweight option that came up a lot, which was what we call the federation adapter option. And that is something that allows you to keep your infrastructure exactly as it is today, but tie your not so federation ready SSO infrastructure into an IDP in the federation. So our final recommendations were centered around making sure that we could help people understand, first of all, which of those things are you looking to do? How much are you trying to outsource? How much are you trying to retain exactly as it is today, so that you can pick a product that works well for you and is going to meet your needs? And then to try to have InCommon be a little bit more visible in terms of guidance about what of these solutions within these different architectural models are going to qualify as federation ready in terms of our standards. We don't want to put the burden on institutions who are trying to be responsible for less by saying you also need to be an expert in federation in order to make a good product decision. So that's a place that InCommon and this community can really help by saying, these are the standards, we've validated that these products meet these standards, and you hook this up and you're going to be good to go, and it's going to take care of everything that we need from our side. So we were most interested in the working group in the federation adapter model because from our perspective, it is the obvious low-hanging fruit. For many institutions out there who couldn't afford to design their IAM program around federation capability, but really wish that they had it, this is a really straightforward, low overhead, extremely doable way to have it all. So I think if we go to the next slide, we should probably step back and talk a little bit about the end game and why all of this matters. And next slide. Thanks, Deidre. So one thing that comes up a lot in my job at Duke, and maybe yours, is how overloaded the term federation is to begin with. So there's all sorts of solution providers out there that boast federation capability as defined by interoperability between their suite of products. But we're really talking about capital F federation, which is something much bigger and about trust and community. We are talking about ditching the guest accounts, letting collaborators use their institutional credentials to access research environments that we host and other resources. We're talking about being able to defend that decision to chief information security officers and cyber insurance underwriters, that by outsourcing that, we actually are not losing anything in the process because we all adhere to common security standards. So this is very different. When we talk about federation, we really need to make sure that we're all working with the same definition of federation, that federation is not just about interoperability, although that's a big part of it. It's also about managing trust. So we do that obviously through InCommon and through Edugain to confer access to services that really need that higher level of scrutiny. That's not just about getting access, but sometimes we're giving access to really high value assets, and we want to make sure that we are having people adhere to community standards and we're not losing any security in the process. So I mentioned earlier that I joined this working group knowing that Duke is really unlikely to ever use a managed identity provider solution. We are one of those schools, as I think a lot of you know, that can never leave well enough alone, and we live to tinker. But a lot of our stubbornness on that point is about feeling that we can trust solution providers and that they understand that capital F federation. And as a result of this conversation about cloud-based IDPs, we actually have started using some of the offerings from solution providers who are very invested in this community, like Cirrus and Unicon. And I think we're stepping up our federation game because of it. So I'm going to hand it back to Deidre to introduce some federation adapter products. But I hope that as a result of this session, we'll all be better community partners in just having another tool in our tool belt, not just for our own institutions, but for other institutions we're trying to interoperate with. Because a lot of times we see that federation capability ends up being something that we don't think about until it's too late. And these adapters are an opportunity to kind of pull things back in, shore them up, and not leave that opportunity for collaboration on the table. Thanks, Deidre.
Thank you so much, Mary. Really appreciate you joining us today. And so, so we're going to move on now to another poll question before we start talking about a couple of these vendor solutions for federation adapters. So Bill, if you could call up this one. Again, I think I have to, God, I don't want to go through my, I'm going to let you guys look at the poll. I'm not going to stop sharing and get caught in my other window.
Yeah, it's happening.
Excellent.
Still a lot of movement.
Excellent.
Looks like hybrid's in the lead.
One probably could have used a 0 to 100% on-prem.
Of course, hybrid, hybrid could be using a commercial cloud and your own on-prem, or your own, moving your own stuff to the cloud. So there's lots of different hybrid options.
Yep.
Mm-hmm. Are we done with our polling?
Yeah, we're
Looks like we're done. Yep.
Anything interesting?
A hybrid in the lead at 57%, and then on-prem 37%. Fully hosted, we're at about 7%.
All right. Well, so when it comes to identity provider as a service, some kind of hosted solution, the focus for today's talk really is on these federation adapters, as Mary described, one of the recommendations that came out of the report. There's a lot of situations where universities are migrating to what I see is often commercial solutions like a Microsoft Azure Active Directory. Some campuses moving to Okta. I don't think so much in this audience based on what we saw earlier. But there are a lot of commercial solutions out there that support bilateral federation, but not multilateral federation. And that's where these adapters come in. So I'm going to just describe Cirrus's adapter. I'm going to not say that much because most of what Cirrus wants to do is a live demo that Mark is going to do for us. And then Charisse is going to talk about Unicon's federation adapter. So I'm going to start off just with super high level architecture. The Cirrus Bridge can integrate with lots of different identity providers. Microsoft Azure Active Directory, Okta, G Suite. The first bridge we ever rolled out in production was our own bridge because Cirrus is a G Suite company. And so we run our own bridge so that we can register our IDP in the InCommon Federation metadata. And we also can connect to LDAP. So the Cirrus Bridge, the SAML Bridge, will help bridge the gap between those identity providers and multilateral federations like InCommon. So most of our customers say if they're migrating to Azure AD, will integrate most of their SAML apps directly with Azure AD or Okta, and they'll use our bridge for the federated apps that require InCommon participation on the part of the SP. Our bridge also supports CAS. So if you're a campus that is migrating to Azure AD, but you still have a bunch of applications running CAS for authentication, and there's no way they're ever going to move to SAML, we can fill that gap for you. I'm not going to cover this slide because that's going to be part of our demo, but you can find the Cirrus Bridge in both the Azure AD and Okta portals, integration networks. We're super excited that over the summer, our bridge was finally added to the Azure AD application gallery. So you'll see that in a minute. And because, as Mary said, we are a vendor who's very much part of this community, we make it a point to make sure that our bridge supports some of the standard specifications that are important for research collaboration in higher education. So multilateral federation, consuming metadata from InCommon. We have some tools to streamline if you're moving from, say, a Shibboleth IDP to our bridge, try to make that really easy so you don't have to readjust your InCommon registration. We could do a lot of attribute mapping to support edu-person attributes that are not necessarily asserted by Azure AD or Okta. We support the RNS attribute category and the REFEDS MFA profile. So with our bridge, you're getting really close to NIH ready. And one of the things that we're super excited about as well is that coming soon, we're going to be supporting conditional access in Azure Active Directory in both Okta and Azure AD. So right now, our bridge is just another SP that sits in the Azure AD configuration or the Okta configuration. So any MFA policies, attribute policies apply to our bridge and hence to all the applications in the InCommon metadata protected by our bridge. But there may be times when you want to pull one of those apps out and require MFA for one of those apps or a certain attribute release policy for one of those apps. And you'll be able to do that soon with our conditional access support. This slide just describes the DNS add-on we have for streamlining your migration from your existing IDP. But in the interest of time, I'm not going to go into that detail. I want to turn it over to Mark so he can actually show you a little snippet of how it works. So I'll stop sharing now, Mark.
Good morning, folks. While I start screen sharing, I am Mark Rankin. I'm the Director of Product and Customer Success for those that don't know me here at Cirrus Identity. What we are going to show you is the experience for a Microsoft Azure Active Directory administrator on the campus integrating with our bridge and how it reflects itself for the end user. Very similar behavior if you're an Okta customer or a G Suite customer. Really, it's just the user experience for the integration in the administrative console. So here we are in the Azure administrative portal. I am logged into our Athena Institute, which is our sandbox demonstration Azure tenant. And if I wanted to add the Cirrus Bridge, I would go here to Enterprise Apps like you would do for any other application. And you would add a new app. And then you would search for Cirrus, for example. And here is our bridge. As Deidre excited that this summer we were added into the Azure gallery. You will see when you first go in, it's kind of the standard wizard. There is a step-by-step tutorial that we encourage customers. The first part of that is actually going to Cirrus Identity and starting a conversation with us about the registration. And there is a registration page here that will engage with Cirrus sales team in terms of requesting your own Cirrus Bridge. At the further down on the tutorial is conversation or discussion about the steps for integrating. And then after you have a conversation and you have a subscription in place with Cirrus Identity, we will give you a couple of parameters, basically the entity ID and the reply URL, which you will use in your bridge configuration. I'm going to actually switch to a pre-configured bridge just for the rest of the demo. So this is a bridge. This is the one that we actually have registered in the InCommon metadata. It is our Athena Institute tenant. As I said, we will give you some parameters to finish the configuration. You see those here. You also have the ability to set up discrete user attributes and claims. Deidre said we are working on an enhancement for conditional access, which will be a per downstream service provider configuration. Right now, if you configure the attributes, it has to be the collective set for anything that you want to integrate with InCommon. But all the other controls in Azure are there. You can provide access controls for the application. You can implement conditional access, such as an MFA policy, which we have applied to our bridge in InCommon, and any number of other controls. So that is the configuration side of it. I'm going to flip over to another window. On the end user side of it, the bridge is really a transparent experience for end users. Here we have EDUCAUSE, which, as many of you know, integrates with a lot of providers. One of our bridge customers is the University of Rhode Island. And you see, when I select that from the identity provider, it takes it directly to the very familiar Azure login experience. If I go back and bring up the Athena Institute, which is our test IDP, you will see that I was already logged into the Azure portal, but now because of the conditional access that is on the bridge, it is asking for my multi-factor authentication, which I will quickly pull up. And of course it is locked. There, so on my phone, I just authorized the access. And now you are seeing that I negotiated with EDUCAUSE and I am now logged in as my Athena Institute end user, which shows up as a QA admin. Same experience for NIH. Here is the NIH compliance check tool, which many folks have seen. If I look for the Athena Institute here, you will see that we'll negotiate the authentication. It will report that multi-factor is enabled. We actually have the assurance profile set up, so it is reporting my assurance profile and then the necessary attributes that are required by NIH. This is also reflected in, certainly NIH services such as PubMed or the ERA app So if I log into PubMed and go for more there and look for Athena again, I see that it's negotiating. And you see that I'm logged in as Mark, so a true single sign-on experience. I can go to my dashboard here, and you see that I have a favorite article in PubMed. So from the end user perspective, the experience is very transparent. It is very single sign-on. It is bringing Azure into, or Okta, or Google G Suite into a multilateral federation, and it really extending the single sign-on experience that folks will have with these tools on campus into the multilateral experience. So with that, I'm going to stop sharing and turn it back over to Clarice. Are we going to you, or
it's back to me just for a second here, just a real quick switch back to me. Let me get back into presenting mode. And so hopefully that gives you a really good flavor of how the Cirrus Bridge works. I just want to point out that one of our biggest motivations for developing this product and working on it over time to make it fit within the higher ed community is to speed people's access to federation. So we know that there's a lot of small to medium-sized schools out there that don't join InCommon, that don't have IDPs registered. And we want to just make that as easy as possible. So we do have a kind of a honed implementation process. It only takes 2 to 4 weeks or so to get things set up for you. And there's some documentation there. So anyone who's interested, you know where to find me. And with that, I'm going to hand it over to Charisse.
Thank you, Deidre. All right, let me share. And I can move everybody out of the way here. All right. And present. All right, hello everyone. I am Charisse Arrowwood. I am the Senior Director of Identity for Unicon. Unicon's been involved with Internet 2 and InCommon for what I think 12 plus years now. It's been really exciting to be part of the community, to come to these conferences and really just interact and overall collaborate on all topics identity. For me, the past 5.5 years out of my 17 at Unicon have been focused distinctly on identity. And it's really brought insight to me about how foundational this topic is. And in higher education, all the great stuff that we want the users and our staff and students to do, they can't until we get really this foundation in place. So with me here today, I'm going to ask to do a quick introduction, is Mike Grady, who is one of our senior identity architects. Mike?
Hi, Mike Grady. I'm, as Charisse just mentioned, identity architect with Unicon. I work with the design and operation of several of the solutions that Charisse is going to talk about. Long history with Internet 2 and InCommon, and in higher education, many years at the University of Illinois prior to working for Unicon.
Thank you, Mike. All right, before I go into discussions about the actual 2 hosted offerings that we're going to talk about today, I wanted to just step back a minute first and thank Mary again, because the foundation of our presentation and having Mary discuss what the community discussions were about and what the needs really are out there in higher education, it presented or laid that foundation that we need, because really what it's about is you understanding what your needs are. We're presenting some options, but as we go through these options, think about what you're looking for as far as your future goals, or what your pain points are today, and how those can be resolved with these solutions. There's a variety of them out there, and yes, we have some more fun polls for you to help us gather information and pinpoint that information. But it's really you understanding these are all great offerings out there, but what's going to be a good fit for me? So as we're going through those, think about that. And then I will try to move through this quickly so that we can get to some questions as well. And with that said, we actually are going to do a quick poll. So Bill, if you can help me with that, that would be awesome. So what is your anticipated IAM model in the next 2 to 3 years? We're looking at the future here, as now we've kind of trended from where are you? And what do you think about looking into the future at this point in time?
Is this the question that you were looking for, Charisse?
Yes. Oh, wait. Yes. Model, no, not exactly. What is the primary? No,
That's
it's
not what-
this is the one that we have at the end, but that's okay. You've got two of them over there.
This
They
is not
had
the one that
4 of them in
popped up.
here, so this was the 4th one.
Okay. All right. Well, that's fine. We really appreciate your participation in here to give us some insight as to where you are and where you're going. All right, it looks like we're at a standstill. We'll go ahead and close that out. Thank you, Bill. So it looks like cost is the top right now, and then we're neck and neck with security and staffing based on a primary driving factor for your shift into the cloud. So that all makes sense. We appreciate, again, your time. All right. Let's go ahead and move on. As I mentioned with Unicon, currently we have 2 hosted offerings in the identity space with actually several others underway. So let's just focus on what we've got today. So the first one is what we call our IDP in the cloud. So this is a full SSO service providing all SAML and CAS services, federation, and easy access to the applications that they need. So our service is very, very straightforward, where we actually assist with current migration and configuration of your current SPs, as well as any MFA policies that you have in place, and or we can consult on that so that if you don't have anything set up in that area, we can actually take care of that during this process. A little bit about the infrastructure, which we'll go into a minute, but we do have multiple redundant instances with auto scaling as needed, and there is a full redundancy offer that we provide. So this again is your IDP in the cloud, right? So what we have here is very simplistic, very straightforward, because that's all that's really needed at this point. So we deploy actually two instances in one region in separate zones using load balancing, and then set up to auto scale as needed to ensure that there's no interruptions in service at any point in time. The benefit of this solution overall is the obvious one, 24/7, 365, Unicon is ensuring that this environment is up and running so that your users can log in and get to the services that they need without issue. So let's talk about the implementation. Unicon's very collaborative in everything we do. So the first thing we do is meet up with you. We discuss what this engagement is about. It can be a very short, sweet, and concise engagement from start to end, depending upon availability of you, the clients, as well as the Unicon team, and marrying up so that timing is not an issue. So we have a checklist that is already templated out. That helps provide this process really some structure. So there's very clear understanding and expectations of what's needed from you as the client up front. Once that information is populated, and then of course we help you with that, we do a review to make sure we're all clear on next steps. Unicon actually deploys the infrastructure, updates the configuration if we're migrating your SPs, MFA, et cetera, and then we hand it over for validation. Our average is to get this up and running within a 2-month period of time. Could be a little less, could be a little more. It really depends on your needs as far as providing information, your availability to do the verification, and then we roll together when you're ready to go to production. Now let's talk about after you're in production. So what about those future needs? I've got additional SAML SPs, I've got additional CAS services that I need to get integrated so my users can get to the tools and resources that they need. We can help you with that in a very easy fashion. Unicon has a support portal that we will provide you access to. When the need arises, you create a ticket with the appropriate information, and Unicon takes it from there. We'll set up the configuration. We'll let you know when it's available for verification, and then all we need is your okay that we're good to go, and then we agree upon that date and update your production environment. All right, this next piece here is about the Federation Gateway. So you've heard a lot about the value of the gateway and in general, just because Federation is a hot topic, and there are a lot of people out there using IDPs that are not federated capable, if you will, right? So if your IDP is not part of the Federation, we want to make sure that there's accessibility, and that's what this Federation Gateway provides. So if you're using Microsoft Azure, Google, Okta, OneLogin, whatever it might be, this will help to fill that gap. So this is a hosted solution that provides you with the management to make updates as needed. Unicon's going to handle that backend 24/7, 365 to make sure that the environment stays up and that you can get to the federation of your choice, InCommon, CAF, EduGain, etc. So as we move on, you've seen this similar screen. We are partners with Okta, and we are listed as one of the preferred providers for to fill this federation gap. We actually are currently working with Microsoft, so way to go, Cirrus. We are working with them and hope to also be a part of their recommended vendor list, and we'll keep you posted on that. All right, so here is our high-level infrastructure. So we're talking about any of the identity providers that have yet to provide the services through federation. So what do? Is we set up multiple instances in a region in different zones, load balance, and of course, again, the auto scaling to ensure that all of your users and your environment stays up across the board without issues. The end result goal is to get to the federation and to those services that you need. Now, the added bonus that we've identified and created for you is the client administrative interface. So this is a very step-by-step process that we work, which is different from our other service, because here we actually give you the time that you need to step through this path and to configure the needs that you have around federation. So we're going to walk through a little bit of that. We have a kickoff call, again, set expectations. Basically, it's a UI guided tour where you're going to set up your IDP, you're going to set up your federation, and you're good to go. Now, one of the key things that I want to mention is Unicon is very aware that everybody doesn't totally understand federation, or even if they haven't been able to access that, how do you make that happen? What is the federation manager at InCommon, and how does that work? So we provide consulting services and recommendations on how they can go about moving forward with that, and then come back to our federation gateway and get things set up. So again, it's very, very collaborative. We want to make sure there's no issues, no concerns, and that everything is very clear for us to be able to help you fill that federation gap. All right, this is what you're going to see. So what happens is, as a client says, you know what, we're really interested in this federation gateway, we meet, we have what we call, the initial kickoff, set those expectations, and then Unicon go ahead and builds out the service. When that happens, communication goes directly to the client in the form of a URL that brings them to this management dashboard. The first page of the management dashboards asks them to go ahead and populate that IDP. After that's completed and saved, you're actually brought up to a secondary page, which looks similar to the IDP, which is your federation information. That's where you're going to populate that information. Again, already being prepared and have gone through that process. Once you hit save, you'll get the message here, and you're actually ready to go. This is a very short-term, streamlined, can actually be done within a week or less, assuming the client and Unicon have availability, and we're set up with the IDP and the federation information. Now, within this self-service dashboard, you also have the ability to change your attributes. So by default, we're releasing all attributes, but you can go in and change the attribute release policy based on your needs as they occur. These other fields are actually informational, so you can always go back and look at your IDP information or the federation gateway and general information as well as anything that you input. So again, pretty straightforward, brings you, the UI walks you through it in a very streamlined way to make sure that federation gap is no longer an issue, and then your users can get to those resources and tools that they need to ensure success. All right, and we don't have another poll because it looks like I missed that one, so apologies on that. That is all we have for today, so hopefully within the time. I tried to speed through it there. We'd love some questions. Anything we can answer for you?
If I may, I'll voice one. One of the things that nobody has really talked about is how do you secure our data in your environment?
I'll start. I guess I'll take part of that question. Of course, we take security very, very seriously. One thing I'll start by mentioning is that we store, with this particular solution, very little data. We serve primarily as a broker, so we're passing authentication attributes from Azure AD to the target SP and not persisting much of that data at all. In terms of security, we have a very elaborate security program. We've responded to the HECFAT, so we have a full list of all of our security controls that we will happily share with people who are interested in our solution. Mark, did you want to add anything as our security point of contact?
No, I always will add something. As Deidre said, we persist almost no data. The only data that we persist for a given customer is incidental log information, just for diagnostic purposes. And our security program includes the HECVAT. We also do external vulnerability testing and other functions as well. So we're certainly willing to have a conversation with you if you have security questions and concerns.
And the answers for Unicon would be similar. We have a security team. We have various security certifications, and similarly, even with the full IDP and the cloud solution, we're still connecting back to Campus Credential Store. So we, again, really the only information that persists with that solution would be logs, which are protected, and with the gateway, there'd be even less.
Looks like we have a couple of folks that raised their hand.
Yeah, then I'll go ahead. I was wondering for Cirrus, you're in the App Store of Microsoft. You're represented as basically as one service provider within but can you differentiate? You mentioned something like, can you also differentiate conditional for the SPs behind your bridge?
That is capability that we have developed. It's basically in beta release now. We're just looking for the first customers who like to use it. And yes, it will use the Microsoft APIs to identify the application within the Microsoft Azure AD framework that's going to be from the EduGain or InCommon metadata. We consume all of EduGain metadata, but you'll be able to essentially set up a bilateral configuration for a specific application that sits behind the bridge to require MFA, to set specific attribute release requirements for that app, and still have the benefits of the multilateral federation. So the answer is yes. You'll be able to set up SP-specific configuration within the Azure AD portal using Microsoft's built-in conditional access tooling to specify requirements for a given SP that's in the federation metadata.
Okay, thank you. Interesting.
I had a question about logging for both vendors in terms of kind of what level of logging is available. Is it primarily through your federation adapters, or is that is that something that will show up in some way on the source IDP, whether it be Azure or Okta or whatever? And then also do you have mechanisms for getting that data into an SEIM like Splunk?
Mark, do you want to take that one?
Sure. So, Christopher, for the first part of it, we are not back populating logging information to the source identity provider. So the logging would be only things traversing the bridge. At present, that information is in Cirrus Identity and accessible with customers through support tickets. We are working on and have on our long-term roadmap SIM integration and other self-service functionality as well, things like querying and those kinds of things. Probably depending on customer desires and requests, that's something in the 6-month to 18-month time frame. But that is stuff we have. Those are capabilities we have thought about and do have long-term plans for.
And for the ID, for the Unicon fully hosted IDP, we use secure syslog if institutions want to bring the logs into their own SCIM. We don't currently have an SCIM hosted solution on our side for the institution because, again, IDP would only be part of an institutional's, the set of logs an institution would want to bring into their their logging analysis. So we will provide the logs that way, or if the client isn't taking advantage of that and needs a copy of the logs, we have a way to transfer them to the client.
Well, thanks, Mary, for setting the stage, and thank you, Charisse and Deidre and Mike and Mark for that great overview of these solutions to get people using Federation.